Hello and welcome to Free Mississippi. I'm Douglas Carswell here at the Mississippi Center for Public Policy, and today I'm talking to Aaron Rice.
Hey Douglas, how you doing?
Aaron is one of the leading constitutional legal experts in the state of Mississippi.
I'll take it.
I would say you're one of the leading constitutional lawyers in the country.
Yeah, well, thank you.
But you're also actually, before any of that, you are someone who served your country. You were a Marine.
That's right. That's right.
Tell us, why did you sign up?
Well, September 11th happened my senior year of high school, and so I was getting ready to go to college and all of that. But of course, that was a really big traumatic experience for our entire country, and made me think about what I really wanted to do at that moment. And I was a young man of military age, and I felt like my country needed me, and the world needed a response here. And so, I just went to a recruiting station right then and started the process of
really. You saw what happened on September the 11th,
yep,
and then you said, right, I'm going to serve my country. I'm going to sign up then and there.
That's exactly what happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and like I said, I mean, it was I understood pretty quickly. I remember, I was a kid, 18 years old, and me and my peers had grown up in a time of relative peacetime, and so, war seemed like something that happened in the history books. It didn't really happen today anymore. Of course, to young people today, that would sound absurd because they've grown up with wars constantly going on, but for my age group, it seemed, kind of just not real. And so I remember a lot of my peers said, "What do you think's going to happen after this?" And I said, "Well, we're going to war." And a lot of them would laugh at that or scoff at that, like, we're not going to war, that doesn't happen today. But I just understood really quickly that we had been attacked on American soil, and we were going to have a, we were going to have to fight back.
You suddenly realized our freedoms and the American way of life was no longer safe, and you decided to do something about it.
That's right.
So what was it like joining the Marines? Was that physically very tough?
Yeah, it's physically very tough. What I would say is, if any able-bodied person who really applies themselves and puts their mind to it and is committed to it can get through it, but it's definitely going to be a challenge.
Probably didn't feel like you'll get through it at the time.
Yeah, that's right. It's a big obstacle, and definitely, you're very proud when you do get through it. It's a big milestone.
And then you were deployed to Iraq. You served in Iraq.
That's right.
And you got injured.
That's right. So I went with the 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines, which was an infantry battalion, into Iraq. We went into a town called Haditha in the Al-Anbar province of Iraq, which is West Iraq. It was really just the hot area of Iraq, and we probably went into the worst place of Iraq possible at the time. Our battalion actually wound up being the hardest hit battalion in the entire Iraq War. We lost more Marines and had more casualties there than any battalion in the entire war. So we got there and just kind of immediately, started getting hit by insurgents very frequently, and I was one of the early casualties of our deployment. We were on a patrol. We were actually going to reclaim a forward operating base, and we navigated through the open desert trying to avoid these kind of attacks. But unbeknownst to us, came into a minefield that had been set for that very purpose near the forward operating base. So my Humvee that I was driving hit an anti-tank landmine, basically ripped the entire front of the Humvee off, and with it took my left leg below the knee. And so I was medevaced out to a field hospital in Iraq, and then to Landstuhl, Germany, where I underwent a lot of surgery, and then ultimately back to the United States.
Okay. And there was presumably a recovery process, and you were cared for as a...
That's right. I was in D.C. for 9 months as an inpatient and an outpatient at Walter Reed Army Medical Center, and my wife was able to join me there and got great care, excellent care from the military, and was able to rehabilitate completely to the point where 2 months after getting a prosthetic leg, I ran a 10-mile race in Washington, D.C. So,
wow.
Completely today.
So you're running races now?
I haven't run a race in a while, but I still run, and I'm active and do any sports or anything I want to do. There's nothing that I say, oh, I can't do that because I have a prosthetic leg.
And you really appreciate American liberty, and you signed up to do something about it. Do you think that also explains why you decided to focus on defending American liberties, not militarily, but through the courts?
I think very much so. I mean, the two go hand in hand in some respects. I joined the military because I already had an appreciation of how great our country is, the rights and freedoms we have, the limits on government power that we have, and the system of government we have that's just genius, and wanted to defend that. But of course, really entrenched that desire during that deployment, and really I was able to see as a young man really how special it was that the rest of the world doesn't have this, that the rule of law did not exist in Iraq, limits on government power didn't exist, rights for the people didn't exist. There was a dictator there that ultimately led to people like me being there, and then an insurgency and anarchy. So,
even speaking as a Brit, people in Britain sometimes say, almost with a sense of pride, we don't have a constitution in Britain, and people think it's somehow a mark of our sophistication not to have a constitution because there's no one document that we can point to that defines powers. But actually, over the past year with COVID and the lockdowns, I think actually we see the superiority of the American system where you've got a constitution, because in Britain you can't appeal to the constitution to defend yourself against politicians. But here in America, not just at a federal level, but at a state level, you can, and this is what you now do. You defend people's freedoms by looking at what the Constitution enshrines.
And isn't that incredible? I mean, sometimes I have to stop and think about it again, that we live in a country where any person on the street can take their government to a court and say, my rights are being violated and I want this to stop, and be heard. They may or may not prevail, but they can do that, and that's an amazing thing about our government and the way we operate.
So access to justice is the key to this, and the unit here, the division here that you head up, specialises in doing that. You take up cases on behalf of ordinary folk out there who've had their rights violated. Give us some examples of this.
Yeah, so one of the things we work on a lot is just defending entrepreneurs and their right to work. I mean, that's something that is under assault, sadly, in America and around the rest of the world, as special interest groups learn that they can, ask the government to impose greater and greater barriers to work, really to serve their own interest. And so kind of becoming clients of the government and asking for more and more protection from competition. And so we are very interested in reducing those barriers and giving people the right to work and having that right recognized as a strong right, both in the federal constitution and our state constitution. And so, an example of that in a case for an entrepreneur is we have a client who grew up in Nepal, doing this practice called eyebrow threading, which has become very popular in the United States now. But for a long time, it was, countries in the Middle East and
Forgive
East
me, what
Asia.
exactly is eyebrow threading?
It's literally taking a loop of cotton thread and having it on your fingers and having a knot in the middle and manipulating it in such a way that the knot moves back and forth and just pulls out hair when it does it. And it's just
maybe I should try that sometime.
Yeah, I certainly should. But it's just become very popular. It's superior to waxing and tweezing and things like that, and it's really caught on. And our client had grown up doing it. It's very safe practice. You don't even touch the customer when you do it. And I saw an opportunity to open a business. She did that and was an overnight success with it, was doing very well. And then realized that our government didn't want her to be able to just open a business like that. And it was really, there were rules that were designed to keep competitors like her out. And, it was so absurd that she would have to spend $10,000 to $15,000 and go through 600 hours of training to get a license, but not 1 minute of that training would teach her anything about eyebrow threading. I mean, the rule wasn't really there to teach about eyebrow threading, it was just to keep eyebrow threaders like her out.
It's a purely protectionist measure.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so we filed a lawsuit for her and have been able to successfully defend her right. She is back working today. She has reopened her business. She is employing other people, and she's doing great. And that's the kind of thing we love to see, is someone who's able to get back to work. But the thing is, as a constitutional litigation center, it has a ripple effect. It doesn't just affect our client, who's named Deepa Batarai, or just eyebrow threaders who are now able to work. We're setting precedents in the court that can be used by analogy to help other entrepreneurs.
This is fascinating because traditionally think tanks have tended to slightly have their head in the clouds. They'll think about abstractions, they'll talk about the founding principles. What you're doing is you're taking those and actually improving the lives of ordinary folk, everyday lives, people who've got a practical problem, and you're leading to actual pragmatic.
That's right, and you really need a group like ours to do this because big businesses, as I mentioned earlier, and special interest groups already lobby the government. They already have their own attorneys. They'll be just fine. But a lot of times for a case like this, there's no money to be made in this. I mean, you're not asking for $1 million in damages. You're just asking for the right to work, and it's going to be hard to find an attorney who can take that on and make any money on the case. So you have a nonprofit constitutional litigation center like us that is not necessarily incentivized by the profit motive, but is incentivized to see good law and to defend the Constitution, and we can do that.
It's amazing. I've been in this role now for just over a month, and the thing that's really struck me about Mississippi is it's a wonderful place to live in so many ways, so many wonderful things about it, but the economy is not nearly as free as I thought it would be. You've got all these hidden restrictions, and they've been written clearly probably by lobbyists, vested interests. And it doesn't just rig the market in eyebrow threading. It does it in all sorts of ways. One thing that we really suffer from in this state is relatively bad health outcomes. And yet I can't help noticing doctors tend to do quite well. And it seems as if there's all sorts of restrictions that rigs the healthcare market.
Yes, there is.
What are we able to do about that?
So right now we have a case where we're representing someone who's a physical therapist and who wants to open what's called a home health agency, which is badly needed in the state. We're a rural state, and you need to be able to get out to people, and especially during COVID when people are afraid to go to nursing homes, afraid to go to places like that because there's outbreaks there, to be able to come into the home and provide some care for them there. And he wants to do that, but like you said, we have a certificate of need system, which makes it very difficult to get a kind of permission slip to open one of those anyway.
This is certificate of need known as a con.
That's right, a con.
By name, con by nature.
That's right. It is very much as a con, and basically, essentially, your competitors have to agree to let you into the market is what it boils down to, and can fight you in court to keep you out. And so you have that to begin with, but then on top of that, we've had for 40 years in Mississippi a moratorium on that con for home health agencies, which means it's literally impossible to open a home health agency in Mississippi, and it has been for 40 years.
This is the sort of thing you would expect to have found in sort of Eastern Europe.
Soviet Russia is where you would expect to see this. I mean, it's very central planning. There's a bureaucratic agency that sits around and uses all of these metrics and all of this gobbledygook to decide whether the market really needs you or not.
But the wonderful thing about the free market is, in order to get permission to do something, you need these things called customers.
Customers who want to pay for it.
And if there are customers and they're willing to pay for it, you have permission to do it.
That's right. And we would see a lot more vibrant healthcare economy in Mississippi and a lot more access to healthcare and decreased prices for healthcare if we would stop doing this kind of thing. And so, but we're taking the opportunity here to try to dismantle one part of that.
What about things like religious freedom? I mean, the Second Amendment, First Amendment, these are, the Bill of Rights,
That's
it's
right.
called, it's actually inspired by the British Bill of Rights. But how is it that in this day and age, those First and Second Amendment rights are still needing to be asserted? Give us examples.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to imagine, but so obviously COVID has affected a lot of things, and so we had to get involved and file a lawsuit for a church because a mayor in their city decided that you couldn't even have drive-in church services, and the mayor well understood that what
I love America, a drive-in
church service, and what these churches were doing was having cars come into the parking lot, park 2 parking spaces away from each other with their windows rolled up, stay in the car. Some of them would use a loudspeaker so you could hear it through the windows. Some would do it over the radio. Some would just have pastors that could preach very loudly and you could hear them through the windows. But it was obviously the safest thing in the world for you to do. And this mayor, for whatever reason, really wanted to show how serious he was and decided you couldn't do that and had the cops citing people and threatening people for doing that. And so we got involved and filed a lawsuit. That mayor understood very quickly that he had gotten himself in trouble and rescinded that order. As to the Second Amendment and even our gun rights here in Mississippi under the Mississippi Constitution, we had another mayor that decided we have a constitutional right under our Mississippi Constitution to openly carry weapons, and it literally makes it clear that the government can't even regulate that. The government can regulate the concealed carry of weapons, but not the open carry. The old thinking was that open carry is pretty safe. Everybody knew that you were armed. What was dangerous was concealed carry. Somebody didn't even know you were armed. But it's a right that we have that can't even be regulated. And our mayor decided, despite that he would unilaterally decide that nobody could openly carry during the COVID.
That's well known. Viruses. This is how to fight a virus.
Yeah, exactly. Something somehow that will help the virus. And again, it was it seemed a little bit of political posturing or something to that effect. But whatever the motives were, it was unconstitutional. And so we got involved there, filed a lawsuit too, and were able to get a court to rule that the city of Jackson can never, ever, ever do that again. The only way that they can is if the Mississippi Constitution is amended, which does not look likely. So, and if they do that again, it won't even have to be litigated whether that order violated the Mississippi Constitution or not. It can be immediately enforced and actually result in jail time for any government officials that try that again.
It's interesting, coming from outside, I know that the issue of gun rights excites a great deal of liberal opinion amongst the commentariat classes in the east coast of the US and places like Britain. But despite having these freedoms that allow people to open carry, I've not seen a single firearm in the state of Mississippi apart from a couple of police officers since I've been here. It's one of those things, it's almost as if people are free to do it, but because people are free to do it, very few people actually do.
Yeah, that's right. I think it's a little more of a boogeyman than anything else for the left. Sometimes they do worry about that, but what you really have is, for the most part, you have people concealed carrying and things like that for personal protection. You have people hunting. You have all of that, all of which is guaranteed in our Constitution, and people are allowed to do.
Yeah. Talk about some of the other things that we've been doing. We talked about religious liberty.
Yeah.
We talked about are there other
Yeah, well,
topics?
we have gotten involved in defending charter schools, just school choice in Mississippi. We worked with the Attorney General's office and some other groups to defend our charter school laws that were under attack.
We've only got 6 charter schools in the whole state.
Yeah, I mean, it's an early program. That's right. And so we had some groups come in and try to sue to strike down our charter school laws. So we actually helped defend some laws in that instance. We've worked on free speech. So we've had another mayor who passed an ordinance, and a city council who passed an ordinance that made it basically illegal to have conversations near an abortion clinic. And so we filed a lawsuit in that case, which resulted in the city rescinding its ordinance. And we've gotten involved in property rights issues. I mean, we advocated and were able to basically stop the government from reauthorizing a practice called administrative forfeiture, which allows the government to take property without judicial involvement, and so things like that.
Now, I've noticed since we've been talking, we've actually rebranded our think tank. We were the Mississippi Center for Public Policy. We're now MacBook Air.
Yeah, that's right. You never know.
Someone will say it's an improvement.
Yeah.
But just before we sort of wind up, I've done a lot of work with think tanks in the UK, and I know a lot of think tanks in the US. The problem with being a think tank is you're trying to engage opinion, you're trying to influence opinion, but fundamentally, if public policy makers want to ignore you, they can.
Yeah.
We're different because we've got this sort of, well, it's the equivalent of having a nuclear weapon. People have to take it seriously. Yeah. Explain a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's an important tool to have. The ability. I mean, you can ignore a white paper or a video on social media, but you really can't ignore a subpoena. And so, there's a distinction there in that that not every matter of public policy is something that goes so far that arguably violates the Constitution and can be brought into court. But when we're talking about things our government has done or is trying to do that does go that far beyond the pale, we have another tool. We don't just have to ask politely. We can sue on behalf of clients and force the government. And again, that is something that I think is beautiful about our design and our system, is that we have courts of law that are there to hear those disputes and to rule on them. And the political branches of government are not, just sovereign. They're not a king. They can't just do whatever they want. They can be forced to abide by the limits on power that are enshrined in our Constitution.
It's interesting. Often you hear people talking about the American system as being litigious, as though that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
But what I'm starting to realize is, so long as justice is affordable and accessible to ordinary folk, being able to litigate against politicians is a very good thing.
That's a very good thing. And it's interesting, I mean, sometimes people don't realize it, but we don't even sue for money. I mean, we literally don't even ask for money when we file a lawsuit. We only ask for the government to stop doing the unconstitutional thing. It's doing it for a court to force them to do that.
But in order to be able to do this, we rely on local donations,
That's right.
local
We
funds.
need, donors allow us to do this. I mean, we're representing a client for free. We're not being paid to do it. The attorneys that we have are not paid by the client, and the only way to do that is for donors to step in and allow us to do it.
I'm going to finish off with a couple of quick questions. If there was one constitutional amendment in either Mississippi or the United States, what would it be? What would you?
Amendment?
Yeah.
I'm going to borrow a phrase from somebody who is actually an advisor to the Mississippi Justice Institute, Ilya Shapiro, who's at the Cato Institute, and he always says that we need a constitutional amendment that just says, and we mean it. So everything that we've already said in the Constitution, we really meant it.
Well,
just abide by that.
I was hoping you would say repeal the amendment that allows the collection of a federal income tax.
Yeah, no, that'd be a great one too. And that was an add-on to our federal Constitution at some point. So
some would say that's where the rot set in.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
And if there was one law you could pass in the state of Mississippi, what would it be?
That's a tough one. I don't know that I have an answer for that right now. There's so many things that there's so much to do. I think it would be. I don't know exactly what shape it would take, but it would be a law that made clear that these kind of restrictions we talked about that make it difficult for entrepreneurs, that those have to end. And we have seen some progress in our state legislature to say, look, you have to have real demonstrable harm that's out there in the public, and you have to use the most narrowly tailored means to address that harm, and that's a good thing. We need to go further than that, and we need to put some teeth into that.
Aaron, thank you so much for being on our pilot show. It's been wonderful. Keep up the good work, and I hope you'll come back on to update us after we've won some of these court cases.
Yep, will do.
Thank you.
you.